Hey, how we doing? It's Dave. It's Whiskey Wednesday. Hope everyone's good out there in the Facebook and the YouTube land. I am Dave. I'm Dave Beck. I'm the owner of Paverson Games and co-designer of Luthier and designer of Distilled. And I want to welcome everybody tuning in tonight. Please make sure I don't know if this is still a thing, but at Facebook, you might need to do something. StreamYard.com, Facebook, maybe not. I don't know if we need to anymore because it's on the page itself. But hey, I hope you all can hop on in here and take a look at. It says Encon says there's an echo on YouTube. That's weird. Hopefully that gets resolved here soon. I'm not really sure why that is, but hopefully we'll figure that out soon, folks. There, I'm going to put you public on this too. That's Nate, I think. You had two tabs open. Okay, well, that's why. So here's the thing, everybody. I want everyone to post, say hi to me. You're going to say hi to Abe in just a little bit because he's my special guest. Put what you're drinking tonight. Say hello to me in the chat. Tell me what you're drinking. I am having some Auchentoshan today. This is actually a little cask strength distillery reserve. This is courtesy of Gene Enyart, friends of ours here in Menominee that went over to Scotland just recently and brought back this distillery exclusive cask strength. It is. I just cracked it open. It's delicious. Gene, if you're watching, thank you much. It is delish. So we've got a great show tonight. We've got a couple different things, a couple announcements, and then I'm going to be bringing on Abe Burson, who is the creator, the OG, the creator of Luthier, as well as co-designer for it as well. We're going to get a chance to peek behind the curtain to see kind of his process over the course of the last few years as far as his design, some of the images from that too. So that'll be fun, but also a chance for you all to ask him some questions. So I hope you've got a chance to type something in the chat. Again, feel free to type in there. I can see it. I can answer it. Tell me what you're drinking. Say hi tonight. Let's get started. Now, of course, if you didn't know, and if you're living under a rock or just happen to be tuning in this for some other reason, we have a Kickstarter going on right now. Luthier is in its 8th day, I think it is. So just over a week. And it's doing really well. I'm actually going to share my screen here so you can see this. Here we are popping in. We're at $466,000 and $390. So really exciting, big number, much bigger than I expected, especially at this point. Last time with Distilled, we were aiming for $18,000 and smashed that. This time I raised it to 40 because I wanted to make sure it was something that if we raised that much, we could still make the game. And we've smashed that too. Now 10 times that already, which is pretty nuts. So if you're not familiar with Luthier, if you're tuning in for the first time, if you go to Kickstarter.com, you'll be able to find it. Just kind of search Luthier. And again, this is the game that we are crowdfunding. We're crowdfunding through August 8th. And you can see here, I've got this plugin from Backer Tracker that actually shows you kind of progressing. These are never right, but right now it thinks it's trending at around $815,000. That would be amazing. Who knows? But it's kind of fun to see that track. It's always fun. You can install this yourself. I think probably if you go to backertracker.com, you'll be able to find that. In fact, I'll go here really quick. I'm guessing there's resources. I don't know. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. But this is really cool, and it does give you a little bit more detail about how many backed per day, how many backers, that kind of thing. So it's kind of fun. And that's run by BackerKit. But anyway, really fun stuff. Yeah, Dave, that's right. Smash. We're smashing it. It's great. It's really exciting to be surrounded by so many awesome people. And that's really showing off probably more than I ever expected with our current instrument voting. So let me go to the, not comments. Well, I could go to the comments, but to the updates. So what we essentially did was we had voting opportunity for people to cast their vote for the instrument that they wanted in the game in a promo pack. I won't go into full details here. Only backers can access this, which is pretty cool. And what that means then is that as they vote, it's been open since 9 a.m. this morning. As backers vote, then they get to choose their top 5 in each category. We had over 200 different nominations as far as instruments that were done. Actually, over 600 total, because 200 per. And over 250, I think, different unique instruments nominated. So crazy stuff. And we are real-time tracking that. You can see this here. I'm showing you kind of under the hood. So essentially what this means is, starting with Enric was the very first one. We can see what they voted for. And then we are kind of digging into the votes. And tomorrow at 9 a.m. this closes. So far, we've had, 863 people vote. So that's awesome. 863 ballots. That's bigger than most, at least in my area, people come out to vote for elections. So this is pretty awesome. So again, thank you to all of you who have gone and cast your vote. If you are a backer, you can vote. If you're not a backer, you can't vote. But guess what? All you got to do is pay $1 to become a backer, a single dollar, and you too can vote. You get to help decide the future instruments that are going to be in the game. One string instrument, one winds instrument, and one percussion and keyboard instrument. So it's really exciting to see that. When it closes at 9 a.m. tomorrow, then what we're going to do is we are going to take the top ones. It'll probably be between 3 and 5, and let you choose from those. We're going to give you a little education about it, a couple lines to talk a little bit about it, a picture of it as well, so you can visualize which one you would want to have in the game. And then everybody will get to vote one more time, backers only, to choose that. Whatever is voted the most is going to get into the game officially. Thanks to all of you. You helped find that, help fund it, and help crowdsource that and pick that. We're going to do the same thing for patrons very soon as well. So this is just the beginning. So anyway, things are going awesome with the Kickstarter, just over a week into it. We've got some other really exciting stuff coming up. One thing that we're going to be doing is on Saturday, this Saturday, I've invited 4 people that are fairly familiar with the game, have played it many times on Tabletop Simulator, helped us play test the game as well. We're going to do a 4-player game live. And this is going to be on, just same as you're tuning in right now, YouTube and Facebook. You'll be able to watch. You'll be able to type and ask questions if you want. And we're going to play a game through, and I'm going to kind of MC/GM that. So you'll see links to attend that soon. This is really for those that want to see some people that have played a number of different times, playing different sorts of strategies, see how they play. We see lots of reviews or playthroughs of new people that have maybe just played once. But this is going to really show off the game and the depth of the game and how you can really synergize and chain things together. So really excited for any of you that want to tune into this. This is going to be a lot of fun. Speaking of instruments, we've got Stuart say the Wintergarten marble machine. Yeah, that was a crazy one. One of the ones that someone suggested is this amazing kind of wooden crank thing. Clearly not, I don't think, from that era, but still a lot of fun, making lots of music. Do search for the Wintergarten. I thought it was Wintergarten marble machine, and watch some videos. It's pretty cool stuff. Thanks, Stuart. So that's happening this Saturday. This is going to be at 1 p.m. Central or 7 p.m. British Standard Time. We've got people from all around the world joining that and playing, and you can tune in and watch. All you got to do is watch. You can be on your phone, you can be on whatever to watch that. Last thing before we get on to the main event here, I want to remind people that we are going to be at Gen Con next week. This time next week, we will be at Gen Con. We will have the game out. People will be playing the game. All those sold out months ago, but also get a chance to look at it, hold it, look, up close and personal with it. I'll be at the booth. You can come back and say hi to me. So really great last chance to kind of see it for yourself before you decide if you want to back this or not. So that's going to be at Gen Con. I'm going to, just for kicks, we can see this is the convention center. It's a very big convention center. And you can see that it's absolutely nuts. I mean, these are all different rooms. Out here is where people play games. Just right here alone, what you see on your screen is where people play games. Paverson Games has a dedicated 9-table section. So 9 games will be played at all times, 3 Luthier and 6 distilled. So swing by that. That's not a booth. It's a section. And then please come back and see me in the exhibit hall. So that's way back here. This is the exhibit hall. Last year, we were had an end cap right here, which is pretty cool. This year, you got to go way back, baby. Way, way back. Let's see if I can find myself. Here we go. Right here. Oh, it's not showing me. Oh, yeah, there it is. Paverson Games, back by the loading dock, people. We got the back of the hall, but that's okay. We've got some spaces spread out, which is actually kind of nice. So come on back and visit us. 2151 is Paverson Games. We were back kind of halfway between the bathrooms and the service desk. Just basically when you come in, walk straight back from the Family Fun Pavilion, you will find us. So that's us at Gen Con. There's a little bit of a zoom in. It's actually not the bathrooms, but I thought maybe it would be. There's a couple. If you know of any of these companies, here's a couple that are around us. I know Alley Cat for sure. They're nearby from over the pond, across the pond. These other ones I don't know as well, but I think some of them are definitely RPG companies and some others too. So come on back and take a look and come and say hi to us. All right. So with that, without further ado, I just wanted to get through those quick things there. And now it's time for the main event. I'm really excited to bring out the person that Luthier would not exist without this person. He came up with the idea years ago. He's been working hard on it for years as well. He's the creator of Luthier. He's a game designer in his own right. He's designed some other games and continues to as well. His name is Abe Burson. He's a great guy. He lives just a couple hours from me too, which is kind of nice. He and I met for the first time in 2020 at a protospiel, which is where designers bring their prototypes to get play tested. But it wasn't for a couple more years until I reached out to Abe to see if he'd be interested in having this published with Paverson Games and co-design. So with that, I'm going to bring Abe out to the stage. Here we go. I wish I had like an applause type of thing here.
Drum roll.
Yay! But here you are. Abe, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Dave?
Nice T-shirt there, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I wear my Luthier shirt, but I'm glad you did. You're representing.
Yeah.
And it looks like you got some instruments behind you too.
Yeah, I'm in my computer music recording area. So I'm at my computer desk. But my wife and I are both musicians, not professional, but for fun. Mm-hmm. And we've got several instruments and some recording equipment that we can play around with here.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. So first off, what are you having tonight? You drink anything tonight, Abe?
Yeah, I was in a beer mood. So I'm from the faraway land of Decorah, Iowa. I've got the Pseudo Sue.
Nice. Pseudo Sue. Cheers. There we go. Nice. Yeah. And is that named after the T-Rex? I think it's in Chicago. Is that right?
I think so. Sue, yeah, because that is the name of the skeleton that's in Chicago. So it's very possible. I think there's also a King Sue, but I don't think I've had the King Sue. I just kind of got the Pseudo Sue and like that.
Oh, is there another one? There's another beer called the King Sue?
I think so. Something like that. It looks very similar.
Nice. Cool. Well, good. Well, this is exciting. So I wanted to be sure to bring you on, but because you can give us kind of that backstory. We can look at some visuals as well. People that are tuning in at home, please chat something in the comments. If you have a question for Abe, a question for me, anything at all, ask us anything. If it's about Luthier, if it's about music, especially for Abe, don't ask me about music. I like music, but I can't play music. But be sure to ask Abe about that as well. Anything else. So please write in the chat and I will be happy to pass the questions on to Abe. Abe, why don't you start us off with, give us kind of like big picture, take us back to where it all began. And if you want, I know I've got some images, feel free if there's anything you want me to pull up too.
Yeah. So Luthier, I'm going to start just slightly before that with game design in general.
Yeah. Great.
Probably I'm from Rochester, Minnesota, went to school in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for a while. I was in the Twin Cities area for a while, and I've been back in Rochester for some time. 2004, I was working part-time at Games by James, like really? Seasonally. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was. James. Yeah, I was working at Barnes & Noble full-time, and then I was doing part-time like seasonal help at Games by James. And I had this idea for a game, but it was just kind of whatever. Didn't think about it much. That's like 2004-ish, 2006-ish. I moved in with my friend Blaine in the Twin Cities area, and I had explained to him I had this idea for a game, and he's like, well, let's try to put it together. And so over a period of weeks and months after work, we'd, frozen pizza, grab a beer or whatever, and just kind of start hashing out this element-themed game that we created together. We had it in a contest, and it was a semi-finalist in the Rio Grande 2009 contest.
Oh, awesome.
It didn't get published, but we got a chance to go to Tag and meet Jay Tubbleson, and it's just kind of a fun experience. So around in that time, 2008, 2009, I was jotting down, coming up with other ideas, and one of those was this instrument maker theme, Luthier. And again, very high level, nothing like too in depth right away, but just like, okay, you know what? I'm getting into Euro games. So if you think back to like 2008, 2009, Agricola was like king.
Yeah.
You had Puerto Rico. Kalis was still relatively new, and that was highly rated, probably in top 50 in BGG at the time. So those games were things that were inspiring me. I really liked the game Modern Art, bidding game.
Mm-hmm.
And then a little bit after that, Fresco comes out, and there's this cool art theme, and you're like mixing paints and stuff. So somewhere in there, and I mentioned this a while back, we did a video.
Yeah.
And I kind of talked about, okay, I'm getting these ideas because I like music, and because I like Euro games, and like, let's combine those things. And I'm taking pieces from some of the existing games I have. So Puerto Rico happened to have the different. So this was wood, right? So it was currently, in the final production version of Luthier, there are 3 resources. And actually the colors are probably similar, but they represent different things. But that's, so I had 3 different types of wood basically that I was using for these instruments, and I'm getting these discs for the workers. But even before that, let's pull up that first picture you've got there.
Yeah.
There's a I found a this is so I'm obviously there's obviously a reason why you have people like Vincent Dutrait in the world, because or really anybody other than me, but this was just a rough sketch of an idea for a card. This is from 2011. And you can see I had like different kinds of resources on there, and that little squiggly thing I think is actually meant to be the string resource.
Right here.
Yeah, like there's like a 4-2, a black, and then like a little squiggly S kind of thing. I think that was for the string. I don't know. I don't even remember some of these things, honestly. So, but you can also see there's the guitar, and then I had that once around symbol. So I was when I was looking at how you would acquire the basically I call it commissions. It was like, well, you're gonna bid with these perspective, I call them clients, in the final version, there's the setting, and they're called patrons. So I was looking at like, how do you interact with the clients? It's like, well, you're kind of bidding on how you're going to do it. Well, there are a few different kinds of auctions you could do in Modern Art. So I borrowed, that idea from there. That didn't last. A lot of things didn't last and morphed, but it's interesting to look at some of this early stuff. I had early on, I didn't have benches yet, but I had roughing, assembly, and finishing stages of the progression of completion. And apparently I had an AP check I was going to do on each of them. I don't know. So that's, that's a really early one. If you skip to the next slide, next picture, there is this is cached from an old Google site. It's not even the current form of a Google site. This was a Google site. And on there, you can actually see, I think it says last updated May of 2013 or something. And in here, I actually described the game, even though it hadn't actually yet been played. There had been one like play test in around 2013 of just a proof of concept of moving instruments from sort of like bench to bench and paying the costs and completing it and kind of seeing what the final results would be. So I had that painting on the lower kind of left of a guitar. There's a gal named Anne who did that for me just for fun. And then the violin was a mock-up that my friend Matt did, and that's actually from about 2009, believe it or not.
Yeah,
that mock-up. you can see it just has, I forgot what that's called, but it has sort of the nonsensical text that they put in.
Ipsum, yeah.
Yeah. And I actually have a description of it. I don't know if I need to read it, but it's actually even then, even though it wasn't really playable, the concept was there. And the gist of it, as far as whether you were creating instruments or repairing or performing, going to the market, managing your resources, worker placement, bidding, those kinds of things. So that's kind of like, that was one of the earlier things I could find, that because it's not like I was
nice
as I was doing it, I was like, oh, I need to document all this. Sometimes I'd just be, writing stuff down or putting a note in my phone or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, so let's go to the next one. Is
cool.
March. March of 2016. So this is one of the earliest. And this may have been around since maybe 2015. I don't know exactly what, but this is one of the first versions of the physical prototype. And so you can see every player had their own individual board.
Are these down here, the brown boards?
Yeah, there's two brown boards, and I was really cheap on supplies, so I was using what I had. So the white board is also the same. It's just yeah. But you can see I had started with this concept of sort of like an assembly line style, and I know that's maybe not realistic, but I was trying to sort of again feel it out and test it out and see how would this work for the different stages. So I had a roughing and assembly and a finishing bench there. I had a place for supplies. You can see the different wood tokens on there, basically like ebony, mahogany, and maple. You've got a place for your money. You've got your bidding chips. On the right-hand side with that meeple, that's actually the apprentice track, which over time sort of morphed out of the game. And then there's
what's this yellow card?
The yellow card is the Luthier.
Okay, that's okay. Cool. Nice.
I'm pretty sure anyway. Like on some of these, I'd have to. Yeah, I think that's the Luthier. And so that would be, at least in concept, very similar to kind of what's now, on the game. Yeah. I wanted to in designing. I'm not a professional designer, and so I don't know what methods some people have. But when I'm designing, especially early stages, I like it to be sort of fluid and flexible, and so I had it very modular with just all these cards, right? And even as we get a little further down to the point of the prototype, sort of before you came on board, co-designing and really developing it and growing it, it was again modular to keep it flexible in case I wanted to make a change. So at this point, I think the bidding was a separate phase. I think it was like you go to market, you work in your workshop, you bid on your instruments. I think it was almost more like I didn't want it to end that way, but I needed to start somewhere of just like what are the different things you can do. So let's go to the next one.
Real quick before I go.
Yeah.
So do we have up here, are these basically kind of market rows of things?
Oh, yeah. So let me see if we can.
Or is that the next? Maybe there's another slide that shows that. I can't remember.
So that's got. Okay, the pink ones are, I think, instruments.
Okay.
Specialty instruments, I think.
Okay, nice.
Ones. And so I think that the white colored cards were the sort of like, here's the current builds or commissions instruments that are available for you to make. And then the pink ones were sort of like specialty in-game personal goal prestige kind of things that were all out on the table that you could go for.
Okay.
And then at the top were the different I think these were the different clients. So, in the next one, you'll see that a little bit more clear. I was looking for how do you make it where you're interacting with other people, right? Like you're making them. Who are you making them for?
Yeah.
So these are the clients. So you have like the turn order up there in the corner.
Nice.
So yeah, and again, I'd have to go back. I have iterations of like, Google Docs of iterations of
Oh yeah.
rules that I'd have to try to match to know
No,
exactly what I
totally.
was thinking at the time.
Well, and actually, speaking of that, so Dave asks, Dave
Yeah.
Hutchings,
Okay.
who, by the way, is responsible for scripting the Tabletopia version of the
Ooh.
current Luthier. Um, Dave asks, how many plays do you think each phase saw before moving on to the next generation?
Wow, that's a great question. So, if I understand your question correctly, you're saying like, how many times did you play test a certain iteration before changing it and moving on? Is that?
Yeah. So, yeah, before, yeah, you moved on to kind of that next iteration of it, or that next big change.
Yeah,
How many plays would it take for you to
yeah.
decide that it's time to change it?
I don't think there's like a one size fits all answer. Um, and honestly, it would be in many cases very few.
Uh-huh.
So one of the things that you'll see, if you've seen my earlier video or just talked to me, or of course now on this, this has been a sort of on again, off again hobby, right? And so sometimes I might, especially as it got into like maybe 2017, 2018 on, but prior to that, it was sort of like I'd pick it up and maybe I'd be intensely working on it for periods of time over a week or two, and then maybe it'd sit for months and not even be looked at.
Uh-huh.
So probably only a couple different plays. Again, it would just depend, but maybe say a couple, three different plays, and then I had to ride that line of like, well, do I make small incremental changes every time, to sort of make sure I'm not messing with something by just making all these multiple changes or lots of major changes. But I had to balance that with the realistic of like, when am I going to actually test this again? How frequently am I going to be able to get people together and that kind of thing. So only really maybe a few per iteration. I think at the point that I signed on with Dave and Paverson, I didn't have an exact count, but it had been play tested 30 to 35 times.
Yeah.
And really starting, I would say in 2015. I don't count any of the initial me trying things out and writing stuff down, really play testing, but 2015 or so was like, there's like one or two play tests that year. And then I would say incrementally a little bit more when I was working on it. So hopefully that answers the question. I certainly wish.
Great answer.
Yeah, I would have loved to do it more, but it's just I had I have a job, a family, other activities, and right now my work schedule isn't overly busy, but for years and years I was working 50 to 60 hours a week. So yeah,
wow.
And most of the time I was working at when other people were available to play test. So yeah, very slow moving in the early stages.
Wow. Yeah. And, something else that's interesting about that I know and everybody else knows too, is it's such a difference now with you being able to play test online. Before, it was all about, okay, when can I get some friends together, or when can I find some other people? So it's a lot different now. So I get that. And that's cool. That's cool to hear that story. Okay, before we go on to the next one, just wanted to say hi to TK and Dennis tuning in. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. These are two of the three of the guys behind Galactic Cruise. So thanks guys for tuning in. Hey all to you, and I think I'll probably see you too at Gen Con next week, I'm guessing. And then as we go into this next one, I had something from Berkey. Berkey's a Midwesterner just like us. He's up in Minnesota. Or Berkey, are you in North Dakota? No, I think you're in Minnesota. For Game Toppers, but he asks you, Abe, what inspired you to design a game around instruments?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know that I could pinpoint like an exact moment where I was like, aha. But I love music. I play several instruments, not particularly well at any one instrument, but I play several instruments. I grew up around music. My dad is a musician. He has a master's in piano pedagogy and was really into classical music. And I'd been into board games on and off over the years. I was a huge Magic the Gathering person going back to like 94. and I did a little D&D when I was younger, and then I got into kind of more what you might call modern Euro games eventually. And I think I was just, I don't know exactly when or how, but I think it's just because of my interest in both of those things that came up.
Yeah, that's cool. That makes sense. Bringing passions together. It looks like things changed a little bit since the last one here.
Yeah, so we're looking at now. This is April 2019. So this would have been several months before I ended up bringing it to Stonemaier Game Design Day. So this iteration actually was, it was changed from this when I brought it that fall to Stonemaier Game Design Day. You can see at the top again, you have the turn order with the meeples there. There's like a draw pile up top there. I don't even remember what that is. You had your market there with the three different woods. I think that was just, yeah. And then I have the performances, that black card there. I think it says perform at a private event. There's different. There's like concert hall and the bistro and just different places. This one happened to be a private event. And then you have some instruments there. And then here's where I was trying to do something. I don't know if wasn't exactly the way that patrons ended up in the game, but I was trying to do something along a similar line with crafting the instruments for clients and crafting, what they wanted. And so we've got like these just different names here and then instruments below them. And then again, I have on the bottom here now, I have these specialty instruments. So you've got a ukulele, a mandola, a viola d'amore, sitar, viola da gamba, and a koto. So those were some of the sort of fancy ones or whatever you could aspire to. And I don't really know much about how well this played out with these, but these did end up this was the sort of the iteration or so before what was kind of the version that Dave played, and then very similar to what I ended up again basically handing off to Paverson. So in the workshops we have our Luthiers, and then we have an apprentice track again on the side. And so people that know the game now, this is those chips are those are the 1 through 5 chips, and the apprentice track is what unlocked your 2 and your 4. And so very in a similar fashion to like the round marker at the top of the current game, but it was something where you actively would have to decide, I'm going to train my apprentice and eventually get basically I thought of it as like, well, what are my resources? Well, I have wood resources, I have money, and I have time. And that's kind of how I looked at these chips, was like, how do I prioritize my time? Right. So I've got 1 through 5, the 2 and the 4 are locked up. I start with my 1, 3, and 5. So that's that apprentice track there.
Nice.
And in the workshop, you can see I had what looks like 15 spaces there. It actually whittled down to 9, which I think actually is still in the current iteration. So like I wanted to have a limit to the storage. I think early on I started with 21. Here I was at 15, and then I eventually whittled it down to 9 with a room for expansion.
Nice.
And then you have the roughing, assembly, and finishing benches. Again, to show the progress and the idea being you could only have one instrument on any one at a time, and you need to kind of move them along. So that's that iteration.
Nice. All right. Should I keep going?
You can go ahead. I do have this is a box cover around 2019. I ended up using this big wooden box you'll see in a picture in a little bit here, because it was cheap from a thrift store and it was sturdy. And that was really just what was practical for bringing a prototype for me. But this was a concept I had. I'm not a graphic artist. I'm not an artist, but this is kind of what I was able to pull from finding some icons and messing with it a little bit in like Google Slides.
Nice.
So that's that. The next one I think is going to be an interesting one to kind of dive into a little bit, because you're going to see these are this is May 19 Luthiers, and
Okay.
I was working with placeholder art that I found on the internet, and I wrote credits. I put illustrated by so and so.
Oh yeah, nice.
These were never, I never sold anything. It was just for my own creative use, purposes,
Yep.
just to add that feel, because one thing that is important, I think, and I think the production that you, Dave, and obviously with Vincent and Matt Paquette and everybody involved in the production, these board games are, aside from being like a social interaction for the most part, some are more social, some are less, but an in-person, sometimes online, sure, with TTS, but an in-person interaction and a tactile experience, not dissimilar from playing a record or reading a book or something, right? So there's, to me, even in a prototype, knowing I'm not an artist and knowing it would be foolish to invest a lot of money in art, I wanted something that represented the feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with these pictures that I found online, and you can see on here, they have a name, and then they have sort of their feature or their title or their specialty, which actually in subsequent iterations, there were no names anymore. They were just the innovator, the virtuoso, etc. They had two instruments that they were more specialized in. They could do all the instruments, but there were two instruments that they were better at.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one style of music that they were better at performing at. So I had in the current version, there are the different eras that you can perform in. In this iteration, there were, I think, 5 different genres that you could perform in.
And just to be clear, and I think people probably see this, but it was kind of set in the modern era, right?
Yeah, I would say more modern. I would say also modern / sort of like era neutral.
Yeah, good point. It's not like there's electric guitars, but
it's like it modern-ish to the point of like, there's jazz music and there's bluegrass, but not necessarily the last 20, 30 years. It could have been from the early 1900s, perhaps.
Good point.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So you'd have like the two in the yellow banner. There's the 2 instruments that they would earn basically an extra point for if they completed, and there's the 1 genre that they would earn an extra point for if they performed in. You can see the starting resources and the starting money. Those were blank, but they were going to be variable based on their power and what made sense and that kind of thing. And then they each have their own unique power or starting ability or that kind of thing. Sort of in a lot of cases, sort of like the breaking one rule concept.
Yeah.
There's an interesting one here that I never tested out. And you can see Franco in the upper right. Before players resolve actions, you can switch any of your own uncontested chips.
Oh man.
Like I was just like, what else can you mess with?
Love it. Yeah,
sure. I was like, let's try that. So that's actually that's probably a first iteration where I had a full palette of Luthiers to work with.
And Abe, would you put when you put a chip that circles for worker, right? Is that right? So what would happen if I were to put a worker on my Luthier?
That's a good question, and honestly, I just had that as the sort of the home base. So when you resolve, you place them face down on your Luthier.
Got it.
And then you know where they are and you see where they are, kind of.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you didn't really. I don't think there's anything that you did as far as like an action to resolve there.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Should I go to the next one?
Yeah. So now we kind of skipped over Stonemaier Design Day, but that's okay. So I did take Luthier to Stonemaier Game Design Day 2019.
Yeah, can you explain what that is?
Sure.
Just for those that are watching.
Yeah, so Jamie Stegmaier, Stonemaier Games, he hosts in St. Louis. He has since I think maybe a few years before that a game design day at a place I think it's called Pieces. I don't remember. It's been a little bit. But it's this cool board game cafe where you can eat food and drink and stuff. And he hosts a design day event, and it's very scheduled. And you take your prototypes, and you have people sign up to play your prototype, and you sign up to play other people's prototypes, and then you give feedback, and then you rate them, and then kind of take that all that experience, and then hopefully that'll be something to move your design forward.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that was like fall of 2019, and then this picture is from the convention that Dave and I met. Yep. This is Protospiel, Minnesota, January 2020. So like right before the pandemic hit the States. In person, again, prototype testing. You can see the really big box there. You can see the central. It wasn't a board because I wanted to have things modular and flexible. But I will describe briefly. You can see in here the chips are mostly in the middle of the table, and those action spots. When you went there, what I had at the time was what some people described as brutal, which to some people is awesome, and to some people sucks. But it was, you put your bidding chips there, and then when you resolve it, the person who basically had the most priority got to pick the upper or lower action or card to take or to resolve. And then the second place had the option to do the other. Everybody else was out of luck. Sorry, you were outbid.
So if you were a third person there, the third in line, nothing. Zero.
Yeah, and that was it. And this came from, it was even more so than that. But like 2018, it was like you're playing 3 turns ahead just to get to the stinking market, just to buy the stinking supplies. But I wanted to start like really restricted, and loosen it up. I will say, actually, going back to Stonemeyer briefly, design day, I got amazing feedback. There's this one, there's a published designer that tested the game, who sat down afterward and gave me some really, I think, thoughtful and wise feedback. One of the many things he said that stuck out with me was thinking about the psychology of, and I'm just totally paraphrasing, but thinking about the psychology and the feelings people get when they're playing the game. And how does it feel when your instrument is stuck here for 3 turns? Or how does it feel when you go to the market and you can't get that resource and then you can't do this? Or how does it feel when you bid and you just come away with absolutely nothing? So right around the time this was at the Protospiel, I was exploring in my mind the possibility of opening things up more, but I had not yet implemented like, oh, well, if you don't win first or second, you can still always do this. Yeah. That was not in the game. And it was honestly never fully in the game until Dave and Richard and everybody, kind of took the reins. I had just started to place like, okay, if you something along the lines of like, well, if you are outbid, you can at least get 1 wood or something. Yeah. So that's probably one thing of note on here. I would also say maybe we can look at, oh no, we're not there. So I think that's pretty much it for that slide.
Okay, cool. Nice. And for those watching that don't know, Protospiel is essentially a meetup of designers where they bring their prototypes and they play each other's games. So you don't just set up and have people come by and play your game over and over. You might set up and play your game, but then you might play 4, 5, 6 other games, and then you might get to play your game again. But it's really a great chance to have a lot of great quick feedback and really raw kind of true feedback on your game, which it's one of my favorite events of the year.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so pandemic happens, and I don't know about you, Dave, but I was feeling, for me, at least in the trajectory of my game, relative to where it had been, I was feeling some good momentum. And then I'm like, oh crap, like what do we do? Like I can't get together with people. My wife is not much of a gamer. Like we can play like Ticket to Ride, or we did the Pandemic Legacy, but there's not a lot of crossover with her and I. So I was like, well, I had actually at some point, I think I had prior to that, just for fun, I had started putting Master of the Elements, that game that Blaine and I designed in 2009. I put that on Tabletopia. So I had a little bit of an idea. So I was like, okay, I can do this. I'm going to put it on Tabletopia. So that's a screenshot. Just to show kind of that's more or less the iteration that from Protospiel
nice.
on Tabletopia. Yep.
Nice.
Let's skip over that rule book for now. Or that's the cell sheet.
Cell sheet, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the cell sheet, and I did that pitch project online, and I got a lot of feedback from a lot of people on just visual and how to lay it out and what to say and what not to say. And I'm not saying this is a perfect one, but this is an iteration that I felt overall pretty good about.
Mm-hmm.
You can see kind of the core mechanic there, and you can see a little bit of the more assembly line style of completing the instruments. You can see more like the central board. I had so one thing that was a little different at that point too is this was more of, I wouldn't call it a race, but I guess kind of a race. Basically, like once a player hits 20 points, that triggers in game, and so at that time it was 8, 9, maybe 10 rounds. Rounds were not quite as long or as intense. So it was still probably a similar game length at 5 players, 8 or 9 rounds. But yeah, that was a score track up top. See what else do we have here? Yeah, I mean you had, I think, and one thing too that I've seen videos on like, well, what's the inspiration for this? And people it's kind of cool to see these reviews and what people connect, and I saw Rado's video and he mentioned it's kind of like a throwback to Kalis, and I'm thinking like, gosh, like when I started designing this, Kalis wasn't that old. Like it was still fairly contemporary. But Kalis was an inspiration among others for that sort of the idea of place first and then resolve. What I didn't like was the static nature of the road. And yes, you could mess with like the variable setup on front, and there's other cool stuff in the game. But I really liked the concept in Puerto Rico and San Juan more for myself for player count and for shorter game. The variable phase order where you're selecting a role and everybody's doing that role. So I actually on here, the way I even see it still is that there's a variable phase order within that resolution, because basically you're saying we're all going to do this now. Yep. And I'm, and it's not exactly the same because A, maybe not everybody's there. And B, just because you resolve it doesn't necessarily mean you get first pick or you get the bonus. Yep. You're just the one resolving it.
That's right.
So yeah, that's kind of I even had the components. You can see I had the tuning peg. So to keep track, you've got the cool resolution board now. Yep. Well, what I had at the time to keep track of whose turn it was to resolve was just a little violin tuning peg, and that was just like your token of like, hey, I'm the one. At one point I even had to pick like, hey, it's my pick, like whatever.
I remember that, yeah.
So yeah, that's that cell sheet.
Nice.
And then the next one I think is a good
oh yeah, look at that
visual. And this is like early 2022. So this is what would have been on the Tabletopia that I handed off. I was talking with you, Dave, a little earlier. I had Dave and Richard Woods like look at the at the time the most current iteration on Tabletopia. So you can see lower left, you got your wood storage at 9. You can expand it. You have roughing, assembly, and finishing. And then what it's basically saying here is you need to have, in this case, one was first priority.
That's right.
So that's how we looked at it. Yeah. And Nathan, actually, I see Nathan is watching, like he and some of the other playtesters had recommended maybe flipping it. That may or may not have happened if I hadn't, signed on and stuff. But anyway, that's just to explain. I've got, when you get to finishing, it's basically saying, well, you need to have your number 1 chip there.
Yeah, your top person.
Top 1. Yep. So, and it's basically saying roughing, you need to have 1, 2, or 3. You spend this material, assembly, similar. And then if you go above that, you have your craft skill. And basically, when you improve your craft skill over time, it basically it sort of lowers the requirement for your chips on your bench, so that you could end up using eventually whatever chip you want on those benches. And then at the very top of the craft skill, in this more assembly line style approach, you would actually skip the last bench and you just go roughing assembly, done. So it's a quicker turnaround.
Yeah.
Performance skills there, it was the different genres. If you did a performance, you would earn the money, but if you happen to have a skill level of 1, you also get a point. If you had a skill level 2, you'd also get 2 points. Nice. Money tracker, and then the apprentice tracker, and again, that's at the time how you would unlock. You would get other things like points and money and stuff, but you'd unlock your 4 and your 2 chips. I will say, so this game is not like Viticulture, but this part did remind me of a little bit of like if you in Viticulture and probably other worker placement games maybe, where you like go to train more workers or whatever, right?
Yeah.
In 2013, I was just starting to feel like this has some legs, this has some meat to it, barely. And I saw Viticulture on Kickstarter, and I intentionally did not read anything about it until 2017, because I was like, I don't know how similar or not this would be. But I don't want it to be similar for whatever reasons. Like I could even see at the time like it was going to be a successful game, and now obviously very successful designer, successful company. But so anyway, that was a sort of tangent about when I saw that apprentice track, I'm like, oh yeah, I think even without knowing it, it was a similar idea. Maybe to Viticulture in that.
Well, and I personally love that. I know that was something that we wanted to be sure to have in the game. We obviously changed it a little bit, but that concept of training people, bringing people into your studio, helping them learn, making them better is really fun. And it's really thematic too.
Yeah.
Oh, here's something.
Cool.
Dave Hutchings asks, was there one or more specific mechanics or features that was particularly hard to remove? So that might have been over time for you. That might have been maybe even, this will be good to hear from me. Like if you heard, oh, geez, Dave, you cut that out. Oh, maybe that, or might be along the way. Was there anything that really stuck out to you for that?
It's a good question. I think, actually, since we're talking about The Apprentice, I think, if anything, this is in the context of I am beyond pleased with the final iteration and the production and the development on Luthier. It's a killer game. The idea and the concept and the feel of working alongside your apprentice and seeing your apprentice grow is probably one thing that I miss.
Yeah.
That being said, there's plenty else that fits, fills that and makes it a better game.
Yep. No, that's a good one. And I would agree actually, because I love that too. I remember thinking, and maybe giving you feedback too, when we were either before we signed it or afterwards, that the trick with it is everybody does it automatically. It's like, well, of course I'm going to do it. So it was one of those things where we realized, let's just automatically give these to them.
Right.
So instead of saying you've trained an apprentice now, of course, we tried to couch it in this idea of your family growing. Like, even though your 2 shows up out of nowhere, the concept is your 1 turns into a 2, quote unquote, grows up, and then you have a new 1. You know what I mean? So, but you're right. That's one of those parts that I remember really thinking was thematic from the original. So.
Yeah, I don't think I really, I don't think I would say I miss or anything else really. I mean, I think, looking back, I remember, Dave, we had a brief conversation about like, I said, I hate to say this, but I said, I think we need to cut out one of the benches and just move it on. Cause I was trying one thing that's really awesome about, probably to me. So kind of the flip of that is, Dave, I think, probably my favorite thing that you added to the game is the patrons and how they work in the game. I was trying to do that with the clients, and I even had at some point I was like, yeah, once you complete X amount of things for them, then they're going to give you in-game bonuses. I'm like, it takes all game to finish, 4 instruments, and then how much benefit are you going to get from it, and that kind of thing. So I think that it was nice to be able to be like, hey, I think we should speed it up a little bit. We can take out that other bench. That's not even, maybe super thematic anyway. And it helps you, and and then you guys, of course, added you can do 2 instruments on one side and 2 instruments on another.
Yep.
Where I was coming from, I will say, my philosophy on this game, once I started digging in, was, even though I'm not a musicologist like Kevin, I didn't read as many books as you, I wanted the theme to lead the mechanics, the mechanism, or whatever word you use there. I wanted the theme to, it's a game. It's not be 100% realistic, but I at least wanted to start there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's like, even with instrument making, I looked at like, well, how long does it take to make an instrument? Oh, several weeks or several months. Okay, well, it's gonna be a process. Yeah. So in the game, it's gonna be a process. And it started out too much, and I think it's hit a sweet spot there where it's not like you just instantly make it.
Yeah.
You have to invest time and money and resources, and that to me is realistic. And I think that you hit that mark of like making it feel like that, but without it sort of being a real slow grind.
Yeah, totally. I like it. I love it. That's cool. All right. Let's see. Is that the end of these slides?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a rule book there, and then we've got the Tabletopia. I don't know if you want to look at the rule book.
Yeah, let me pull that up here just a second. Rule book first, real quick. So this is it, and I can kind of slowly scroll through this.
Sure. So this was, and I sent to Dave, it was iteration 22 point something, and that wasn't a date. There's a question earlier about like, how many times I play tested something in iteration. Well, like sometimes I think I didn't even play test an iteration before I was like, okay, this has a distinct difference now, or to me, a distinct enough difference. I'm calling it a new iteration. So This was rulebook version 22.2.6 or something. I don't know. That's awesome. So it has your components, your setup. It talks through that player board workshop that we just talked about. And then you get into like page 3, we're looking at, just more setup and how you set up your chips and like how you get your special, the innovator starts out with their popular music skill 1. So anytime they immediately would be getting points during popular music. If you go on to page 4, you can see the score track and the overall board layout.
Oh yeah.
And again, you put your chips in the middle there, and then if you win, you get the top or the bottom. Oh, another thing I do kind of miss, but I mean, it's not a big deal. And I think some of these things even showed up as like names of cards for the specialty workers or something. But there was this thing that I liked and a few other people liked. It didn't need to be in there, but it felt a feel good thing. I had acreages in there. Yeah. So if you're like, oh man, I'm out of storage and I don't have the money or whatever to buy, or whatever it is. Like I've maxed out my storage. Well, you can buy an acreage.
Yeah.
And then it's like it was non-replenishable, but it had, it had wood resources that were separate from your storage. And I liked that sort of like, like I've got this and you don't kind of thing.
Totally.
Yeah. Let's see here. So 5, there's more setup. You can see similar to now, obviously the Luthiers and families are different now as far as their actual historical figures and there's theme behind them. But I had that sort of ranking of like, and I intentionally picked 10 in 10s in case at some point there was something that would fit in between them. I would be able to say, this is 35 or whatever.
Nice.
But that's kind of the order of starting gameplay initiative. And then you can see the next page, you got that playing around, and it's phase 1, phase 2, and reset basically. Phase 1, you're placing the chips. Phase 2, you're resolving, and then you're doing a little bit of reset. Just more gameplay stuff. And then you could probably skip to like 11. So the equivalent of what has become some of these final end game scoring goals that we're going for on the top of the game. And then were these are examples of like a little bit closer to Catan, like biggest army or longest road, of like the first person to do this, to meet this criteria, gets this.
Yeah.
But somebody could actually surpass them and then take it from them.
Totally.
So that was kind of the common goals, and then there were personal goals that you could get, similar, at least loosely, to what's currently in the game. And then the final scoring is just you hit the point scale was much lower. You hit 20 points, and then that triggers the end game. You get, I think I decided 1 point for a build on your reffing, and then half points for finish on the finishing bench, and then a couple potential tiebreakers. But that's kind of the overview of. And again, this was like, if not the exact iteration, very, very close to what I handed off to you.
You submitted, yeah, for sure. Nice. Let's see if this is still working. If I've got this up, I can pull it up. We'll see if it actually loads. Bad connection. Okay, there we go. Abe still has the Tabletopia mod. So Dave Hutchins, if you're watching, he actually said earlier, he said, let's see where it is. He posted, he said, I know that UI, because he's very used to that. But yeah, real quick, you can see this is actually in Tabletopia still. One thing I did want to point out that's different now that I don't think you've mentioned is that when you had it so that the chip goes on to the instrument. The chip kind of, as opposed to going on a bench, it's kind of, this worker is focusing on this instrument, which I thought was interesting. Correct. It's a nice kind of way to visually demonstrate how that worker is continuing to kind of focus on this instrument. So,
And actually, that triggered in my memory when you were doing a play test. I'm going to say 2020-ish. I actually had it where they would lock in for the duration.
I think I remember that. Yeah. And
the payoff was that, like, the better chip you put on there, the more money, the more points, whatever you get upon completion. But it definitely locked it up. And I remember you were the one that suggested, like, well, what if you just like put them there and then you took them back and then like they just didn't move until you put them back again? I'm like, that's a cool idea.
Yeah. The instrument sleeps at night when the workers go home. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So I thought this was pretty cool to see that. And then, you've got your, like you mentioned, let's see if I can get one out here. Like you mentioned, here's what you had, and which evolved into the different locations on the main board that we've got. But, you resolve that location. And then, like you said, you'd get, well, I guess these would be face up, I think, if I remember right, maybe. But again, you'd get to kind of choose from one of the top or the bottom, right? That was how it worked.
Correct. Yeah. And and I tried to have it. It was as you can see here, like one location you could either do, like you would be able to pull an instrument or something else. Like one of them is improve your performance skill. One of them is do performance. Another one is that promoter deck, which had the things like the acreages in. You could do an advertisement for.
Yeah, there you go.
You could there was one card in there where you could literally search through the build deck and pick out the instrument that you wanted because you really needed that instrument.
And we've still got some of that. So it's neat to see how so much of that has kind of evolved into what it is today, which is exciting. That's cool. Let's see. Dave Hutchins has a question. Question for me. Are you able to define what it is that you saw in the game that made you think this is a Paverson Games game? Oh, yes. Good question. So I'll leave that up. I think so. So what's interesting is I played this, like Gabe said, in 2020, January, February, whenever that was. It was the very first time ever that Distilled had been played in public. And I was playtesting Distilled. I was playtesting, like I just said, I was playtesting other games. Abe played Distilled. I played Luthier. That's kind of what you do. You play each other's games. And I remember thinking, like, to your point about like, losing things, if you're is third place or whatever, I remember thinking like, oh, this is frustrating. But I also really enjoyed this concept of making. So I think that's one, Dave, is the concept of making. If you haven't figured it out with distilled, you're making something, right? So I think that's a crafting, something that's really interesting to me. But at the time, remember, I was not thinking about publishing anything else. I didn't even know what I was doing with distilled yet, besides maybe hopefully kickstarting it someday. So I played it. I think we went our separate ways. Like you said, Ed, maybe you play tested distilled online. I play tested Luthier online. Like we were kind of giving each other feedback again, just like we were doing during the pandemic. Here's the part where I'm fuzzy that I'd have to go back and see when it was I reached out to you about possibly publishing it. Cause I'm getting it confused with, there was a time that I was over in Scotland. So I went to Scotland before 2020, came up with the idea for distilled, worked on it. But then I went back to Scotland in 2022 summer. And I can't remember if we kind of signed it.
We had by that time
in the spring of 22 or in the fall of 22.
It was spring of 2022. Because I think you'd reached out like very end of 2021. You're like, hey, let's like, where are you at on Luthier? I want to play test the game. And then shortly after that, you're like, hey, do you mind if you get a mod, which is what you have up here now, for me and my developer to try out? So I would say very late 2021, early 2022 is when those conversations of you getting more involved in playing it and checking it out happened. And then I think we signed the contract it's March, April, or May or something. Okay, perfect. So that was then, and it was just like you see here. This is exactly what we did. I'm almost positive at this. When we signed this, I had no intention or thought of saying, we're going to take this back to the 1800s or 1700s. At this time, it was like, okay, let's start working on this. Richard's amazing. So he started kind of working on development and working through that. I started coming up with some ideas that I thought was kind of interesting, but really not straying too far from what you see here. Definitely having kind of benches on both sides that you go to. And then what happened? And so I'm getting to your question, Dave. So it was that crafting. It was that idea of hand making something. I love the name. I still remember that when we signed it, and I was starting to think about telling people about Luthier. I'm not going to name any names, but multiple people you need to change that name. Nobody's going to like that name. No one's going to want that name. It's going to turn people off. And I also heard someone else told me, if this doesn't have rock and roll and other things, no one's going to be interested in this. That's what they want. And I was like, nope, I'm sticking with this. I love the name, even if people can't pronounce it, including me myself. Who's Luther?
It's Luther, right? Martin Luther King. But that crafting, that idea of being able to make things starting from either scratch or close to scratch and creating things and putting them out in the world was really something exciting too. But then, long answer here, Dave, but then I signed it and then I went over to Scotland. And again, it was okay, let's keep chewing on this. Let's figure this out. I went to an instrument museum over there and I thought, this is good. This will be fun to kind of help me learn a little bit. I'd been reading some books, I think, about it, but not much because I was still so in the world of distilled. I was trying to figure out how to get that shipped and pulp and everything delivered. I went to an instrument museum. And this was in Edinburgh, Scotland. And the instrument, it's a phenomenal. If you're ever in Edinburgh, people have to go watching. And they had all these harpsichords on display, and they had violins on display, obviously behind glass or in cases. And each one had a story about how this was made by this person, such and such, John Broadwood and Sons, or whoever, or Stradivari, for such and such, this noble or this person. And I was like, wait a minute, this is it. This is where it can be. I can get around IP because we can include all these awesome people in history and they can't sue us. But also, I can really dig deep into the history and the research behind that too. And I can come up with this patron idea. And on the spot, I came up with this idea of patrons give you things, but they lose patience if you don't make them happy, because there's this famous thing about Stradivari writing a letter to a patron saying, trust me, the varnish is drying. Trust me on this. I'm going to get it. I know it's late. I'm going to get it delivered next week. And that's when I came up with the idea to have the patrons that you get, real people making certain things, orders just like you already had as customers, because you already had that concept, but then showing patience somehow where they're giving you gifts as well. So
yeah, they were just basically like names or like maybe part of like a personal goal. It wasn't even really developed.
Yeah, but still, like that's when it clicked. I still remember right now, Richard and I meeting in person. He came up to visit me. We were having a pint at a pub in Dalkeith, and I remember kind of pitching him this idea of the patrons, and like I was getting excited. The tubes, and you move them back, and the patients, and get things, and like in classic Richard style, he's just like looking at me and like shaking his head, like. Dave, you're crazy. So I think that's when I really got the bug and got super excited about it, realizing that we could set it in this moment in history. We could hire on someone like Kevin to really be able to kind of speak to that and also appeal to people. And that's also when we started realizing this could go way beyond just stringed instruments, even though it's called Luthier, and that's for strings. We could go beyond that and appeal to people that play lots of different instruments in bands and orchestras as well. So.
It's interesting to me how there are not that I could find. There isn't the equivalent of the word luthier for any of those other instruments. And
you're right.
It's just weird. To me.
You're right.
Why not?
I think my guess is, or I don't know if it's a guess. I think it's probably pretty accurate. Is so many of those things are made by machine. So after the Industrial Revolution, those jobs went by the wayside because anything brass or anything that kind of has that needs to be made by a machine or is made by a machine. Even percussion, obviously a cast this or a stretched that over a barrel to make a drum. So, I mean, not always, obviously everything can be handmade, but I think in most cases, the professional instruments are that, but I think there's still something to that idea of wood has to be a finely crafted, violin has to be made by hands. And there's, of course, as you know, too, still mystery behind why a good violin sounds the way it does. Is it the varnish? Is it the wood? Is it the shape? Is it, so it's fascinating. So, cool. Well, hey, we've gone a little bit over, but this was really fun chatting with you, Abe. Is there anything else you wanted to leave people with before we sign off for the night?
I mean, I guess just thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to talk through this. I know there wasn't a lot of questions, but just to kind of show some of the, behind the scenes backstory. I really appreciate the support of all the playtesters and the online community and the people who are backing the game now. I think it's just very satisfying to see something that you've, put your energy into, your creativity into, and seeing other people enjoy it and get excited about it. And I'm appreciative of that.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you too. Like I said at the beginning, this wouldn't exist without you at all. Like it's, as you know, maybe one of the first things everyone says is vintage Detroit. When do they talk about that?
Oh man.
But
yeah.
The second thing, or many times the first thing, is the mechanic. Like that mechanic is a killer mechanic that I think really attracts people and gets people excited about exploring that. So it's pretty brilliant what you've come up with. So
yeah.
So kudos to you, Abe.
And you as well.
Good team. We're a good team. So with that, we're going to sign off, everyone. And the beauty of this is, of course, these videos will be on forevermore. So you'll be able to go on to if you're watching this, that, but you can tell other people if you think they'd be interested in learning about the process behind this. It's both on Facebook and on YouTube. You'll be able to find this as a recording. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And for those people asking questions too, thank you so much. And please feel free to reach out. Abe is active in our Facebook communities and Discord too. So if you have questions you have for him, be sure to call him out, and I'm sure he'd love to answer them as well. So with that, everybody, have a good night. Happy Whiskey Wednesday, and hope to see you soon online or in person. Bye-bye.